Hey there, everyone. Welcome to my podcast, Scientists Free from Religion. On this podcast, we treat religion as a secular topic. We may cover, we may approach topics that are not directly connected to religion, but whenever religion come up on the conversation, religion will be treated as a secular and topic that should stand on its shoulder. We not treat religion as special. So if religion is good, it will be accepted as good. But different from the, let's say, the common sense, here religion is not treated as special. Generally, people like scientists or people in general, they tend to either treat religion as good. Most of the time they are religious people, but even agnostic and non-religious people, they tend to treat religion as a common good. So they tend to avoid the topic. And whenever they talk about religion, they tend to follow into the common trap, which is they tend to choose the most happy and the most, let's say, not confronting idea. So religion is treated in general as a common good. As one example, recently the Pope decided to get involved into artificial intelligence. I did a very big map. I scanned. I decided to take a look on what the media was saying. I found that most media found that the Pope, that was a good news that the Pope was interested in artificial intelligence. I believe it's the opposite. If you take a very close and very critical thinking perspective on the involvement, on the fact that the Pope got interested in artificial intelligence, the Vatican got interested in artificial intelligence, I think it's something that we should get worried. Most of the time when the Vatican, when the Catholic Church got interested in something, if you look in the past, if you look at the data, it's not good news. So welcome to this podcast. I'm very glad you are here. I hope we are going to have an awesome time together. I hope that you are going to learn a lot together. And I'd like to invite you to share, to leave your like. This podcast is available on several platforms, such as YouTube, Spotify. In general, I make it available in as many platforms as I can, as it's available as I can do. So I hope we have an awesome time together. So I hope you learn a lot from this podcast.
Usually when we talk about understanding our world, there's this expectation of precision.
Oh, definitely. Like we want a math equation.
Right, yeah. It's like engineering or medicine. You fall off your bike, you break your arm, and you go to the emergency room.
And you just want them to fix it.
Exactly. The technician takes an x-ray, they slap that black and white film up on the light box, and the doctor just points a pen at it and says, there it is.
Yeah, the jagged white line. I mean, it's entirely binary. You can see the fracture with your own two eyes. It's either broken or not broken.
Exactly that. It's clean. And I mean, even when it hurts, it's comforting because we fundamentally like things to be visible.
We really do.
We like the world to be perfectly categorized. And we crave that exact same diagnostic visibility when it comes to the biggest questions of all.
The existential stuff.
Yeah, like where did we come from? Why are we here? Are we just meat or is there a soul? We want an X-ray of the universe that just points to the answer so we can stop wondering.
But then, you step into the world of philosophy, of cosmic origins, of existence and morality, and you realize very quickly that the X-ray machine is just utterly useless.
Oh, completely.
Because we're looking at a landscape of reality that is incredibly murky. I mean, we're dealing with competing belief systems, ancient texts written in dead languages,
right,
and, the absolute bleeding edges of theoretical physics, plus the bizarre, totally subjective experience of human consciousness.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters.
Oh, truly.
But, that doesn't mean we can't navigate it. It just means we need a completely different set of tools to read the scans.
And today, we are grabbing those tools.
We really are. So welcome to the Deep Dive. We are so thrilled to have you with us as we unpack a truly massive, frankly intimidating topic.
It's a big one.
It is. And I want to mention up front that today's mission is heavily inspired by the editorial vision of Dr. Jorge Garapires.
Yeah, he brings a fascinating background to this kind of inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Pyers is a researcher with a PhD in bioinformatics, so he spent years in the academic trenches at institutions from the University of L'Aquila to the University of São Paulo and Fiocruz.
Which is an intense scientific background.
Exactly. But beyond his work in biology, mathematics, and programming, he's dedicated his writing to exploring that exact murky frontier where science and religion intersect, and, very often where they violently collide.
Yeah, he's authored series on everything from artificial intelligence and democracy to critical thinking and atheism.
Right.
And his focus, and really our focus today, is to examine these sweeping questions of origins, morality, and existence, strictly using scientific methods, rational inquiry, and secular reasoning.
Just sticking to what we can prove.
Exactly. We're going to look at religious traditions, sure, but not as sources of divine authority. We're treating them entirely as historical, cultural, and psychological phenomena that are absolutely subject to critique.
So no appeals to sacred texts.
Nope. No divine authority as proof.
Which brings us to the foundation of the architecture we're going to explore today. We are drawing from Richard Carrier's highly comprehensive, profoundly detailed book, Sense and Goodness Without God, a defense of metaphysical naturalism.
It's a hefty book.
Oh, it's massive. And this isn't just a critique of religion. It's a rigorous, ground-up attempt to build a complete, functioning worldview using only what we can observe, test, and prove.
Now, before we really wade into the deep end here, I want to be completely transparent with you.
Yeah, this is important.
The source material we're diving into contains arguments that are highly charged. They touch on deep-seated political and religious beliefs. Carrier is fiercely, unapologetically advocating for atheism and secular humanism.
It's not pulling any punches.
No, not at all. So I want to assure you that we are not here to endorse his viewpoints or to tell you what to believe. Our goal is just to impartially report on Carrier's philosophy.
Right, we're just laying it out.
Exactly. We want to put his worldview under the microscope, figure out how the engine of his logic runs, and present it to you so you can evaluate the mechanics of his arguments for yourself.
It's an exercise in critical thinking. Because to understand how a thinker like Carrier can look at the vastness of the cosmos and claim that a universe completely devoid of a god makes perfect logical sense, well, we can't just jump straight to the Big Bang.
No, that would be skipping a few steps.
Right. We first have to understand his rules for how we know anything at all.
Because before we can tackle the meaning of life, we have to establish the ground rules of reality itself.
Epistemology.
Yes, epistemology, the study of how we determine what's true, what's false, and how we justify those beliefs. And Carrier's own intellectual journey is actually, I think, the perfect map for understanding his epistemology.
He really is.
Because he wasn't raised as this hardline, dogmatic atheist. He grew up in a very liberal Methodist environment.
And that upbringing shaped his baseline expectations of truth. In his childhood church, the Bible wasn't treated as a literal historical document or some infallible science textbook.
Right.
It was treated almost like a collection of fables, a narrative tool for teaching basic moral lessons.
But as he grew older and his education expanded into the hard sciences, he began to see the Bible differently, right?
Yeah, he found it contradictory. And I think more importantly, it seemed entirely disconnected from the democratic, scientifically driven society he was actually living in.
It just didn't map onto reality.
Exactly. It lacked explanatory power for the real world.
So he went searching for something that did have explanatory power. And he didn't run straight into Western materialist atheism.
No, he didn't.
He actually found his first real answers in philosophical Taoism. Like he stumbled across a translation of the Tao Te Ching in a bookstore, and it just resonated deeply with him.
Which makes sense. It's very naturalistic.
Yeah. He became a devout Taoist, embracing this simple naturalistic wisdom. And this led to a pivotal moment in his life because through his meditative practices, he started having profound, almost drug-like mystical experiences.
Yeah, he describes one specific, incredibly vivid experience while he was serving in the Coast Guard.
Oh, the story is wild.
It is. He was out at sea, deeply sleep-deprived, standing on the deck of a ship far from land, just staring up at a massive, unobstructed starry sky.
And in that moment, he felt his soul literally expand to the size of the universe.
Yeah, he felt a profound, holistic, undeniable connection to the cosmos.
Which, I mean, for the vast majority of human history, an experience of that magnitude would be considered undeniable proof of the supernatural.
Oh, absolutely. It would be the ultimate, unbreakable anchor for religious faith. You felt the divine. Case closed.
But Carrier kept educating himself. He kept studying biology and neuroscience, and he eventually realized that this overwhelming, transcendent, magical experience actually had a completely biological, natural explanation.
Yeah, if you think about the physical state he was in,
Right.
severe sleep deprivation, physical isolation, the sensory environment of the dark ocean.
All of that plays a part.
Oh, it dramatically alters brain chemistry. The brain's parietal lobe, which helps us orient ourselves in physical space, figure out where our body ends and the world begins, it can essentially quiet down under those specific conditions.
So he realized his physical mind was producing the sensation of cosmic expansion, not some supernatural force reaching down to touch him.
Exactly. And that realization forced a total reevaluation of his worldview, including his lingering cultural connections to Christianity.
So what did he do?
He sat down and read the entire Bible cover to cover as an adult. And applying that same critical, analytical lens, basically refusing to give the text a free pass just because it was old or revered, he found it morally repugnant.
Yeah, he points to passages where the biblical God explicitly condones slavery, commands the wholesale genocide of neighboring tribes, and demands the death penalty for minor infractions or literal thought crimes.
Right. And it was this dual realization, the biological nature of mystical intuition on one hand, and the moral failure of ancient scripture on the other, that's what finally cemented his atheism.
Okay, so having stripped away both his own mystical intuition and ancient scripture as reliable sources of truth, he found himself at square one.
Blank slate.
Yeah. He had to build a new system for knowing what is real. And he starts at the most foundational level of human communication, which is language.
Right.
Carrier argues that words are not magical incantations. They don't have inherent cosmic meaning. They're just arbitrary codes that human societies made up to describe sensations.
Hey there, thanks for being around. We are going to make a small break. I'm going to share with you my books. I have several books. So far, all my books about religion, atheism, which have been published a lot, they are in Portuguese, which is my main focus. But if you are interested, you can still buy my books to help me to support my work. I have several books. For example, one book that I'd like to recommend now is AI by Sci-Fi. AI by Sci-Fi is a book that talks about artificial intelligence, which is everyone is talking about artificial intelligence with ChatGPT, all this amazing stuff that they can do. They can talk, they can create video, they can create podcasts. This podcast, for example, there are several episodes that was recorded using artificial intelligence, which is amazing how I can do that. I can even interact as you could see in several episodes. So I would like to invite you to buy my book AI by Sci-Fi. It's available on Google Books, Google Play. It's also available on Amazon. So you can buy my book. If you are interested in something a little bit more complex, a little bit more technical, I do have as well technical book. For example, I have one book about computational thinking, in which I talk about Kasparov. It's a technical book. Greg Kasparov was the first guy to be beaten by a computer. He has a very nice book about that, how artificial intelligence overturned the difference between human and artificial intelligence. So please buy my book and offer me all the support. You can find all of them on Amazon. Hopefully, in the future, I'm going to write also about religion, atheism, and science. But I do have a podcast. I do have a blog called the Scientists Free from Religion. The same name of the podcast. And you can find several already publications about several topics in which talk about science, religion, and atheism. So, hope you enjoyed the show. So, let's come back to the show.
And he divides these sensations into two specific types, reducible and irreducible.
Okay, that's a crucial distinction. Break that down for us.
Sure. Think of the concept of the color green. You can't explain the subjective experience of the color green to someone who's been blind since birth by breaking it down into other concepts.
Because they have no reference point.
Exactly. You can talk about light wavelengths and photons all day, but they will never know what green looks like.
Yeah.
It's an irreducible sensation. You simply have to experience it through your own sensory apparatus to know it.
Okay, and reducible.
But the word cat is a reducible sensation. It's a complex pattern of other smaller sensations,
Like what?
like the feeling of soft fur, the shape of pointy ears, the visual of four legs, the auditory sound of meowing. You can combine these individual concepts to describe a cat to someone who has never seen one.
So language is basically just a massive code book for shared human experiences. We agree on the codes so we can talk to each other.
Right.
But how does that tell us what is actually true in the world?
Well, this leads us to Carrier's core principle, and it's a heavy one to digest. He says a statement only has meaning if it makes predictions about experiences.
Predictions about experiences.
Yeah. If a proposition predicts absolutely nothing that can be tested, seen, heard, or felt by anyone, it is quite literally meaningless.
Okay, that is a very robust form of empiricism.
It is. Let's use a mundane example. If I tell you I have a cat in my kitchen, that statement is actually a prediction.
Right.
It predicts that if you walk into my kitchen, you will experience the visual sight of a cat, you might feel a cat rub against your leg, or you might hear a meow.
And if I go into the kitchen and none of those predicted sensory experiences ever occur, the statement is simply false.
Exactly. But let's say someone claims there is an invisible, intangible, completely silent, utterly undetectable cat in the kitchen.
Well, you can't prove them wrong.
Right. But Carrier argues that claim isn't just false, it's entirely devoid of meaning. It predicts nothing. It has zero impact on human experience.
But wait, I have to push back here for a second because Carrier mentions the movie The Matrix to explain this, and I want to wrestle with that analogy.
Oh, The Matrix is perfect for this.
Okay, let's say we're all plugged into a simulation. Absolutely everything feels real. The steak tastes juicy, the cat feels soft, the sun feels warm on your skin. If our sensations can be so flawlessly hijacked by a computer program, doesn't that break his whole rule about relying on our sensory experience to define reality? I mean, if experience can be faked, how do we know it's real?
It's the classic philosophical trap. But Carrier uses the exact logic of his own rule to dismantle it.
How so?
Because in the narrative of The Matrix, the reason the simulation is considered a fake illusion is precisely because there is a way to wake up from it.
Oh, I see.
There are glitches in the code. There are agents defying physics. There's a red pill. There is a broader, grittier reality that you can physically step into and compare with the simulation.
Right.
Because you can experience the contrast. The term illusion has meaning. But Carrier argues, what if there were absolutely no way, even in theoretical physics, to ever experience a glitch?
Like it was perfectly flawless.
Yes. What if there was no red pill, no waking up, no undetectable seam in the code? If it is fundamentally impossible to ever detect the simulation, well, then calling it an illusion is a meaningless statement.
Because there are no predicted experiences that would ever reveal it to be fake.
Exactly.
If it acts like reality in every conceivable, testable way forever, then for all intents and purposes, it is reality.
Precisely. Reality is defined by the experiences we can actually predict and test. If the universe operates flawlessly according to physical laws, with no hidden seams and no supernatural overrides, then that physical system is our reality.
That's wild to think about.
It is. And Carrier uses a fantastic old proverb to illustrate the futility of arguing against this. He says, trying to change the definition of reality to include untestable supernatural realms is like trying to pay the entire earth with soft leather so your feet don't hurt, rather than just putting on a pair of shoes.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, you have to work with the code book of human experience we actually possess.
Okay, I'm tracking with the leather shoes. Our understanding of reality has to rely entirely on testing predictions against our physical experiences. That makes total sense for things like cats, colors, and gravity. But how do we reliably test claims of the extraordinary? Because human history is just full of claims about the supernatural, divine intervention, and historical miracles.
And that brings us directly into the practical application of this epistemology. We're moving from the abstract theory of meaning into the actual messy pursuit of truth.
Okay.
And the tool we use for that is the scientific method,
Okay.
which we have to weigh against claims of the paranormal.
And Carrier places the scientific method on an absolute pedestal. He values it above all other forms of philosophical inquiry or theological revelation.
Oh, completely.
Why? Because science marries two wildly different, almost contradictory human traits. First, our boundless creativity, our ability to dream up wild hypotheses about how the stars form or why diseases spread.
Right.
But it pairs that creativity with ruthless, brutal doubt. Science isn't just making a creative guess, it's actively trying to destroy that guess with evidence. You try to prove yourself wrong.
And this introduces a concept that surprises a lot of people, especially critics of science. The idea of an empirically based faith.
Wait, faith in science?
Yeah. You'll often hear religious apologists argue that scientists have faith in their theories, just like religious people have faith in God, so it's all the same thing.
I hear that all the time.
Right. And Carrier acknowledges that scientists do exhibit a type of faith. They trust that the laws of physics will hold tomorrow, just as they did today, even though they can't travel tomorrow to check.
Sure.
But he draws a massive bright line distinction. The scientist's faith is justified by repeated, observable, historical evidence. It's the faith earned through relentless trial and error.
Whereas blind faith?
Blind religious faith, on the other hand, demands belief in the absence of evidence, or sometimes in direct defiance of observable evidence.
And a massive part of that empirically based faith is that science is inherently tentative. It's allowed to change. A lot of people see scientists updating their guidelines, say, changing their minds about whether dietary fat is good or bad, or updating the behavior of subatomic particles, and they think, see, they don't know anything. They keep changing the story.
Right. They see it as a weakness.
Yeah. But Carrier argues that the ability to change conclusions based on new evidence is science's greatest superpower. It's a feature, not a bug.
Exactly. If a belief system cannot adapt to new facts, it's brittle. It will eventually snap under the weight of reality. Science survives and thrives because it is a mechanism for constantly refining its proximity to the truth.
And this reliance on evidence leads to the ultimate rule for evaluating any claim, a rule popularized by Carl Sagan but deeply embedded in Carrier's framework, which is extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
The burden of proof, it rests on the person making the claim.
Yes.
If you claim it rained yesterday in your neighborhood, ordinary evidence like a wet sidewalk, a puddle in your driveway, that's perfectly sufficient because rain is an ordinary event we all know happens. But if you claim you have a living, breathing, fire-breathing dragon in your garage, you can't just show me a scorch mark on the wall and say, see, dragon.
Guess it could be anything.
Exactly. A scorch mark could be a fireworks accident or a blowtorch. You need to provide evidence commensurate with the extraordinary reality-bending nature of the claim. You need to show me the dragon.
And to demonstrate how a good historian weighs this kind of evidence, Carrier provides a really fascinating historical case study.
Yes, the rain miracle of Marcus Aurelius.
I loved reading this part of the source material. Let's really set the historical scene here for everyone.
Okay, let's do it.
So the year is 172 AD. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, the famous Stoic philosopher, he's fighting the Marcomannic Wars near the Danube River. His army, specifically the Legio II Fulminata, is trapped deep in enemy territory, surrounded by a Germanic tribe called the Quadi.
Sounds grim.
It is. It's blisteringly hot. The Romans are cut off from water. The soldiers are dying of thirst. The horses are collapsing. They are on the verge of total annihilation. And suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, a massive violent thunderstorm rolls in. It pours torrential rain, saving the Roman troops from dying of dehydration, while simultaneously striking the enemy Quadi troops with terrifying lightning, scattering them.
Wow.
It is an absolute, undeniable miracle.
The event itself happened. The historical puzzle is, whose miracle was it? Because we have completely conflicting accounts.
Right.
We have pagan sources from the time attributing the sudden staving storm to Jupiter, the Roman god of thunder and sky. We also have accounts claiming it was summoned by an Egyptian wizard who was traveling with the Roman army.
Wait, an Egyptian wizard?
Yeah, a man named Harnuphis, who supposedly called upon Hermes or other Egyptian deities.
Yeah.
And crucially, we have hard physical evidence supporting these pagan claims.
Like what kind of evidence?
Roman coins minted right after the event depicting the rain miracle with pagan symbols, and a massive detailed relief carved into the column of Marcus Aurelius in Rome, which clearly shows a pagan rain god, Jupiter Pluvius, soaking the Romans and drowning the enemy.
Okay, so the physical and contemporary evidence all points to a pagan interpretation.
Right.
But then, fast forward a few decades, Christian writers start circulating a completely different story.
Yeah.
They claim that it was actually a contingent of Christian soldiers within the Roman legion who fell to their knees, prayed to their Christian God, and that is what caused the storm.
So how does an objective historian evaluate these competing claims? Who do we believe? Carrier argues we must use a tool called explanatory scope.
Meaning?
Meaning which theory accounts for all the physical and documentary evidence without having to invent wild excuses.
Okay.
Let's look at the wizard theory. The idea that an Egyptian wizard named Harnafis was present, saw a fortuitous natural thunderstorm rolling in, and claimed credit for it perfectly explains all the evidence.
Yeah, it does.
It explains the pagan writings, the minted coins, and the statues on the column. It fits the cultural context of a superstitious army perfectly.
And the Christian theory?
The Christian theory, however, completely ignores the contemporary physical evidence. It relies on texts written much later by people who weren't even there.
Which is a huge red flag.
Absolutely. To believe the Christian account, you have to invent an excuse for why Marcus Aurelius, who famously persecuted Christians, would mint coins honoring Jupiter if Christians had just saved his life.
That makes no sense.
Exactly. The wizard theory has a much broader, more cohesive explanatory scope. The Christian story is what historians call an ad hoc addition, a story made up later to steal the credit.
So, applying the historical rigor, what does this mean for the big historical miracles, the foundational ones? Like, if billions of people today believe that Jesus rose from the dead, doesn't the sheer volume of belief over thousands of years count as evidence? Doesn't the impact of the event prove it happened?
Well, Carrier tackles this by comparing the resurrection of Jesus to a definitively historical event from antiquity, which is Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon River in 49 BC.
Okay, so how do we know Caesar crossed the Rubicon?
We have multiple independent accounts. We have accounts from Caesar's own allies. We have accounts from neutral observers. And most importantly, we have accounts from his bitter, mortal enemies, like Cicero.
Right.
Cicero hated Caesar, but he wrote down that Caesar crossed the river. The event is widely attested by contemporary cross-checked sources with no reason to lie for each other.
But when we look for that same standard of evidence for the resurrection...
For the physical resurrection of Jesus, Carrier points out glaring absence. We have zero non-biased contemporary accounts. We have no Roman bureaucratic records of an empty tomb. We have no hostile Jewish records from that specific week complaining about a resurrected man walking the streets of Jerusalem.
Which you'd think someone would mention.
Right. If a man actually conquered death and walked around a major city, you would expect his enemies to write about it, even if just to call it a trick. But we have nothing.
Wow.
We only have the writings of highly devoted, deeply invested followers written decades after the fact, in a different language, in a different country.
That's a stark contrast.
It is. Furthermore, Carrier notes that claims of miracles, resurrections, faith healings, magic, divine interventions were wildly common in antiquity. The ancient world was incredibly credulous, and religious fraud was rampant.
So it wasn't a unique claim back then.
Not at all. But notice a trend. As literacy, education, the printing press, and scientific understanding spread over the subsequent centuries, the frequency of these recorded, undeniable miracles absolutely plummeted.
It's the idea that miracles only seem to happen in the dark. They happen in the distant past or out of focus or to a friend of a friend.
Exactly.
But once you shine the harsh, unforgiving light of scientific and historical skepticism on the universe, the supernatural always seems to retreat into the shadows.
Always.
So if we apply this incredibly rigorous standard, demanding extraordinary evidence and explanatory scope to the ultimate domain of religion, the origin of the universe itself, what does the beginning of everything actually look like without a creator?
Well, we have to shift gears here. We are entering the realm of cosmology, moving from human history to the macrocosmos.
Let's do it.
The standard scientific consensus is the Big Bang model, the idea that our universe began roughly 13.8 billion years ago as an unimaginably hot, infinitely dense kernel of energy that inflated rapidly.
But Carrier wants to know what caused that kernel. Where did the Big Bang come from?
Right, and he looks to multiverse theories. Specifically, he highlights Lee Smollen's cosmological natural selection theory and chaotic inflation theory.
Okay, the multiverse. Whenever I hear that, my brain immediately goes to comic books and science fiction movies.
Marvel has definitely taken it over.
Yeah, but Carrier grounds this firmly in theoretical physics. Let's talk about Smollen's idea because it's wild, but it makes an incredible kind of logical sense.
It's brilliant.
It's essentially the idea that universes reproduce. Smolin suggests that inside the singularity of every black hole, the intense compression of matter and energy causes a new universe to be born on the other side, so to speak. And crucially, the physical laws of that new universe are slightly mutated from its parent universe.
And that mutation is the key,
Hmm.
because it introduces natural selection on a cosmic scale.
How so?
Think about it. If a universe has physical laws that don't allow for stars to form, it will never create black holes, and it will never reproduce. It's an evolutionary dead end.
Oh, wow.
But a universe that happens to have the right physical laws, the right gravity, the right nuclear forces will produce billions of stars, which eventually collapse into billions of black holes, birthing billions of new universes.
So the successful ones just keep making more of themselves.
Therefore, the vast majority of universes in the multiverse will be the kind that produce stars, carbon, chemistry, and eventually life. It explains why our universe seems so perfectly fine-tuned for us without needing a fine-tuner.
That is just, it's a beautiful concept. And chaotic inflation theory is another angle on this, right?
Okay.
It's the idea that there's a constantly expanding underlying quantum field, like a massive pot of boiling water.
Yeah.
And every so often, a localized pocket of that energy freezes out, stops expanding so violently, and inflates into a distinct, stable universe, like a bubble forming in the boiling water. What's vital for Carrier's argument here is that both of these theories, black hole reproduction and chaotic inflation, rely entirely on known observable scientific concepts. We know quantum fields fluctuate. We know black holes exist.
Right.
These theories don't require inventing an ad hoc supernatural being who exists outside of time and logic. They are just extreme extrapolations of the physics we already observe.
Which brings us to the core of his worldview, physicalism. The idea that absolutely everything, every star, every thought, every emotion, is ultimately just an arrangement of matter and energy in space-time.
Wait, even thoughts and emotions?
Yes. Carrier argues that energy isn't some mystical glowing force. Energy is literally just a ripple or geometric distortion in the fabric of space-time. And the physical laws of the universe, like gravity or electromagnetism, they aren't rules handed down by a cosmic dictator policing the universe.
Right.
They're just the inevitable, unavoidable ways that physical entities behave when they are bound by geometry.
Okay, let me make sure I'm getting this. If I put a perfect sphere on a slanted hill, it's going to roll down. It doesn't roll down because a god commanded it to roll. It doesn't roll down because it wants to. It rolls simply because the physical geometry of the sphere interacting with the geometry of the hill leaves it no other mathematical option. The law of gravity isn't a commandment, it's just a description of that geometry.
Exactly. The behavior is emergent from the geometry.
Yeah.
And this physicalist view leads to a profound, almost counterintuitive shift in how we view time itself.
Time. How so?
Well, in both relativity and quantum mechanics, time is treated as a physical dimension, just like up, down, left, and right. The flow of time, that deep subjective feeling you and I have, that the past is gone, the present is happening, and the future doesn't exist yet. Carrier describes this as a psychological illusion created by our physical brains.
Okay, my brain is melting a little bit here.
It's a lot to take in.
I want to try an analogy. It's like looking at a reel of physical movie film. The entire movie, the beginning, the middle, the end, it all exists simultaneously on that strip of celluloid. That is space-time. But our consciousness is just the light bulb of the projector, illuminating one single frame at a time, moving sequentially down the strip.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it.
Yeah.
The universe exists as a four-dimensional block. The reason the projector bulb only moves in one direction, the reason we remember the past but not the future, is due to entropy and what physicists call symmetry breaking.
Okay, break that down for me. Explain symmetry breaking like I'm 5.
Imagine you drop a glass on the kitchen floor, and it shatters into 100 pieces.
Okay.
That is, entropy systems move from order to disorder. Now, theoretically, the laws of physics are time symmetric. They work exactly the same backward as forward.
Right.
So why doesn't the shattered glass ever spontaneously reassemble itself and jump back into your hand?
Because it's impossible.
Well, because there was only one specific arrangement of atoms that makes a whole glass. But there are trillions of different arrangements that make a shattered glass. Statistically, it is infinitely more probable for things to break down than to build up.
Oh, I see.
Our brains can only record memories by creating physical structure, chemical bonds in our neurons. That recording process creates entropy. Therefore, our subjective experience of time passing is just our brains experiencing the accumulation of information in one direction.
Wow.
The future only feels distinct from the past because information piles up. It is entirely mechanical.
Okay, I am buying the physics, and the movie reel analogy helps. But I have to play devil's advocate here, because this is where the human intuition rebels.
Up for it.
If the universe is so incredibly complex, if planetary orbits are so precise that we can predict an eclipse 1,000 years from now, if the conditions for life are so perfectly dialed in, doesn't that inherently imply a designer?
The classic watchmaker argument.
Exactly. If I'm walking on a beach and I find a pocket watch in the sand, I don't assume the wind and the waves randomly assembled the gears over millions of years. I assume there's a watchmaker. Doesn't the intricate machinery of the universe look exactly like a watch?
It's arguably the most powerful human intuition there is. But Carrier synthesizes a potent counter-argument by looking at the history of science.
What does the history show?
He points out that the ancient Greeks looked at the planets in the night sky. They charted their movements and saw that their orbits were so mathematically perfect, so elegant and predictable, that they concluded it must be the literal handiwork of the gods. The perfection was proof of the divine.
Makes sense for the time.
But then Isaac Newton came along, centuries later, and proved it was just gravity operating on mass. The complexity and perfection was just an emergent property of incredibly simple, mindless physical laws. Carrier argues that historically, the God hypothesis is just a placeholder for human ignorance.
Ah, the God of the gaps.
Exactly. Whenever we encounter a complex natural system we don't yet understand, we say God did it.
But as a scientific theory, Carrier says God did it completely lacks that explanatory scarb we talked about earlier with the rain miracle.
Precisely. Let's take the watchmaker argument seriously. If God is an omnipotent, perfect architect, why did he use such a convoluted, incredibly slow, ridiculously messy process to create us?
That's a good point.
Why use billions of years of random cosmic radiation, stellar life cycles exploding and dying, and microscopic quarks just to eventually make human beings? A watchmaker designs a watch efficiently. He puts the gears exactly where they need to go.
You don't just throw parts around.
Right. You didn't throw a bunch of metal in a blender for 10 billion years hoping a watch falls out. When we actually look at the universe, it doesn't look like an efficiently designed watch. It looks exactly like the messy, chaotic, trial and error result of unguided physical forces acting over immense stretches of time.
Okay. So if the universe is just geometry and physics, if it's just a blind machine with no grand architect, that brings us to a very uncomfortable question.
I think I know where you're going.
Does that mean you and I are just biological machines? Are we just meat computers?
Yeah.
If absolutely everything is physical, what happens to the concept of the soul?
This brings us down from the macrocosmos to the microcosmos, the intimate machinery of the human mind. Carrier argues for strict mind-body physicalism.
Meaning?
The mind is not a ghostly passenger riding around inside the physical vehicle of the skull. The mind is entirely the active physical product of a functioning biological brain.
So it's an action, not a thing.
Yes, in the exact same way that digestion is the active process of a functioning stomach, consciousness is the active process of a functioning brain. When the physical brain ceases to function, the mind, the consciousness, ceases to exist.
Yeah.
There is no soul to detach and float away into an afterlife.
And he backs this up with a concept called the reduction of the sciences. I want to trace this out because it is fascinating.
It really connects everything.
Think about a complex human behavior like fear. Imagine you're walking in the woods and you see a shadow that looks like a bear. You feel terror and you run. On a macro level, that's sociology and psychology, how humans react to threats. Right. But how does that fear actually happen? Your psychology reduces down to biology. Your eyes send a signal to a biological structure called the amygdala, which pumps adrenaline into your bloodstream.
And then?
But how does the amygdala work? It reduces down to chemistry. The signal is transmitted because sodium and potassium ions are physically rushing in and out of the cellular gates in your neurons, changing the chemical balance.
It's all physical.
And how do those chemicals know what to do? Chemistry ultimately reduces to physics. The ions move because they carry positive and negative electrical charges, and they're obeying the mindless geometric laws of electromagnetism. So an abstract feeling of fear is actually ultimately just electrons moving according to physical laws. It's all connected, and it's all entirely physical.
But critics of this physicalist view, those who believe there must be something more, a soul or a spirit, often use a famous philosophical thought experiment to prove that a physical machine can never truly have a conscious mind.
Which experiment?
It was proposed by the philosopher John Searle, and it's called the Chinese room.
I'm familiar with this one. Let's lay it out for the listeners.
Sure.
Imagine a man is locked inside a closed room. He only speaks English. He doesn't understand a single word of Chinese. People outside the room who speak fluent Chinese slip pieces of paper with Chinese questions written on them through a slot in the door.
Okay, got the setup.
Now, the man inside has a massive, incredibly detailed rule book written in English. The book doesn't tell him what the words mean. It just gives him algorithmic instructions. It says, if you see a paper with this specific squiggly line on it, copy down this other squiggly line from page 400 and pass it back out.
Right, so to the native Chinese speakers outside the room, they're passing in complex questions, and they're getting back fluent, brilliant, perfectly coherent answers in Chinese.
They think he understands them perfectly.
They assume that whoever or whatever is inside the room completely understands them. But the man inside understands absolutely nothing. He's completely blind to the meaning. He is just mindlessly following a physical algorithm.
Exactly.
Searle's argument is that a computer or a purely physical biological brain is exactly like that man in the room. It processes symbols, it fires chemicals, it moves electrons, but it has no inner understanding. It has no actual consciousness.
And when I first heard the Chinese room argument, part of me completely agreed with Searle. My smartphone can translate Spanish to English right now, but I know my phone doesn't feel anything about the poem it's translating. It's just math. So if my brain is just a more complex computer, where does the feeling come from?
It's a highly intuitive, compelling image. But Carrier provides a devastating rebuttal, often known in philosophy as the systems reply.
How does he reply?
He argues that the thought experiment relies on a severe lack of imagination regarding what that rulebook would actually have to be to truly simulate human conversation over a long period.
Okay, what do you mean?
To convince a native speaker outside the room that they were talking to a human, the rulebook couldn't just be a static list of canned responses. It would have to be able to remember previous parts of the conversation.
Oh, true.
It would have to adapt to new information, change its opinions, crack jokes, and generate spontaneous, creative responses.
Yeah.
The architecture of that room would have to be monumentally complex.
And Carrier's ultimate point, and this completely changed how I view the thought experiment, is that we keep falling into the trap of looking for the man inside the brain.
Yes, the homunculus.
Exactly. We keep looking for a central observer, a soul, a little homunculus, sitting in a theater in our heads watching the screens of our eyes. But there is no core observer. The physical system itself is the presentation.
The whole thing together.
In the thought experiment, the man passing the notes is just the CPU. He is just one tiny part. But the entire room, the man, the vast memory systems, the incredibly complex, adaptable, self-updating rulebook, that entire integrated system would absolutely understand Chinese. You are not the man in the room. You are the room.
That's a perfect way to summarize it. I am the room.
Okay, I'm with you on the system. I am the room. But I still have a massive hurdle here.
What's the hurdle?
If I am just a biological machine, a highly complex room full of chemical rulebooks, how does a machine experience the subjective, undeniable feeling of being alive? How does my biological brain actually experience the redness of a red apple?
Philosophers call that subjective internal feeling qualia. And Carrier is unapologetic here. The redness of red doesn't exist out in the universe. Out in the universe, there are only photons oscillating at different frequencies.
Right.
The redness is simply how the brain's internal software computes and presents the frequency of photons hitting the retina. It feels magical to us, but it is entirely mechanical. And Carrier emphasizes that this biological explanation of consciousness explains the medical evidence far, far better than the soul hypothesis ever could.
Walk me through that medical evidence.
Think about traumatic brain injury. The most famous case in neurology is Phineas Gage.
Oh, the railroad worker.
Yes, in the 1800s, he was a railroad worker, a very polite, hard-working gentleman. An explosion drove a massive iron rod straight through his skull, destroying a large portion of his frontal lobe.
And he survived somehow.
Miraculously, he survived. But his personality completely changed. He became impulsive, aggressive, and profane. His friends said he was no longer Gage.
It totally changed who he was.
Now, if your personality, your memories, your kindness, and your ability to process morality reside in an immortal, immaterial, untouchable soul, why does physical damage to a lump of meat completely alter who you are?
That's a really good question.
Why do chemicals like a few shots of tequila or a daily antidepressant so drastically change our mood, our decision-making, and our behavior?
Yeah.
If the soul is driving the car, Why does putting a flat tire on the car fundamentally change the driver's personality?
Wow.
Carrier argues the soul hypothesis completely fails to explain why our consciousness is so intimately, fragilely dependent on physical brain states. The physicalist view that the brain is the mind explains all of it perfectly.
Okay. If I accept the physics, and I accept the physicalist view of the brain, that leaves us with a massive elephant in the room.
Oh yeah, religion.
If we don't have immortal souls, and if the universe wasn't created by a divine watchmaker, why is there a church, a mosque, or a temple on almost every corner of this planet? Why do the vast majority of human beings across all of history believe in religion? If this isn't divine truth, what exactly is it?
To answer that, we have to deeply deconstruct religion itself. We have to analyze it sociologically and psychologically, treating it as a natural human phenomenon rather than divine revelation.
Where does Carrier start with that?
Carrier starts his deconstruction by pointing out what he bluntly calls the inefficiency of God, or the idea that the universe is, in his words, a moron.
It's a harsh critique, but his logic is sound. He argues that if a supreme, all-powerful being designed this specific universe specifically to produce human life, he used an absurdly inefficient, brutal method.
Very brutal.
It took billions of years of cosmic violence, radiation, and multiple planetary extinction events, like the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs, just to clear the way for mammalian evolution. And look at the universe itself. We live in a universe that is 99.999% lethal, freezing vacuum. Even on our own planet, the majority of the surface is undrinkable salt water. The land is constantly threatened by earthquakes, tsunamis, venomous predators, and microscopic diseases.
That's not exactly welcoming.
It doesn't look like a cozy, lovingly prepared nursery built just for us. It looks exactly like a highly dangerous, indifferent environment that we barely managed to evolve to survive in.
And beyond the physical design of the universe, Carrier points a highly critical lens at the moral design presented in religious texts.
Right.
If God is perfectly good, and the Bible is his word, why are his actions in those texts so often contradictory to basic modern human compassion? We mentioned earlier the passages condoning the owning of other human beings as property, or the commands to slaughter entire cities of non-believers.
Those are tough to reconcile.
Carrier argues that a truly divine, perfect being would not need thousands of years of modern theological apologists to explain away his brutal behavior. The texts read exactly like what they are: the cultural, political, and moral dogmas of ancient, warring, Bronze Age peoples, not the timeless wisdom of a perfect creator.
Which brings us back to the core question. Why does religion persist and thrive if the physical design of the universe is so flawed and the texts are so human?
Right, why is it still here?
Carrier says it clearly isn't because of the self-evident, factual truth of the divine. Because if one specific religion were demonstrably, factually true, there would be universal global agreement, just like there is global agreement on the periodic table of elements.
Yes.
If a god wanted us to know the truth, there would be clear divine aid. You'd see literal, visible energy fields protecting the correct churches from lightning strikes, or undeniable, repeatable miracles performed only by the correct priests. But we don't see that. Lightning hits churches just as often as casinos.
Instead of divine truth, Carrier argues that religion spreads exactly like a mimetic virus.
Like a meme.
Right, this draws on Richard Dawkins' concept of the meme. Not an internet joke, but the original biological sense of the word. A meme is an idea or a behavior that spreads from person to person within a culture, competing for space in human brains, just like genes compete in an environment.
And religions are good at spreading.
Religions persist because they're incredibly well-adapted, highly evolved mimetic structures designed to hijack human psychology. Why are you a specific religion? Usually, it's simply geographical. You adopt the religion of your parents and your hometown.
That makes a lot of sense.
It spreads through tradition, childhood indoctrination, and immense peer pressure. And historically, as Carrier points out with overwhelming historical evidence, it didn't spread through peaceful debate. It spread through the sword and the fire, through conquest, colonialism, and forced conversion under pain of death.
I hear all of that. But I want to introduce a counter-argument that I hear all the time, which we can call the medicine analogy.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's say a religion brings someone profound comfort while they're grieving the tragic loss of a child. Or let's say their belief in God motivates them to spend their weekends running a soup kitchen for the homeless. Isn't that religion serving a good, highly practical purpose? It's like taking a medicine. Even if the underlying myth, the active ingredient, isn't literally historically true, the effect on the person's life is beneficial. Why would someone like Carrier want to tear that down?
It's a very fair point, and Carrier doesn't dodge it. He addresses it directly by extending that exact medicine analogy to its logical conclusion.
Okay.
He says, imagine you find a primitive culture living in a jungle. They chew on a specific bitter tree root because they've discovered it cures a severe headache. The root works. It is genuinely medicine.
Right.
But that raw root also contains 1,000 other active chemicals, and chewing it causes severe liver damage, hallucinations, and long-term harm.
It cures the headache, but the side effects are toxic to the system.
Exactly. Religion, Carrier argues, is the raw root. It absolutely contains an active chemical that humans desperately need. The chemical of community, shared purpose, ethical frameworks, and philosophical comfort in the face of death.
But the side effects.
But because it's bound up in the root of supernatural authority, unquestionable dogma, and absolute certainty, it brings terrible, toxic side effects. Bigotry against outsiders, the suppression of free scientific inquiry, holy wars, and the moral justification of cruelty in the name of a silent God.
So what's the alternative?
What science and rational secular philosophy allow us to do is synthesize the root. We can extract the active chemical, the community, the ethics, the psychological comfort, so we can use it safely without swallowing the toxic side effects of dogmatism.
Which brings us to the final, most important question of this entire deep dive, because it's easy to tear things down. But if we throw away the dangerous root, if we strip away all the supernatural authority in the ancient texts, we aren't just left floating in a dark, empty, nihilistic void. We have to build something in its place. What does the pure, active chemical of a secular, godless society actually look like in practice?
It looks like secular humanism. This is where Carrier shifts from critiquing religion to building his positive philosophy. Stripping away the supernatural allows us to build a framework for morality, beauty, and politics on a foundation of actual, observable reality.
Let's define secular humanism exactly as Carrier sees it. It operates on two basic premises. First, that humanity and human welfare are paramount. We don't need a cosmic parent to tell us we matter. We are the most important things in the universe to us. Second, we must use secular, evidence-based, rational solutions to better our welfare, not mystical ones.
And in this framework, ethics isn't handed down on stone tablets from a mountain. Ethics is essentially understood as a highly developed branch of psychology and sociology. Morality is driven entirely by the biological goal of human happiness.
Because we're biological creatures.
We are evolved biological creatures who inherently desire happiness and wish to avoid physical and emotional suffering. Carrier argues that emotion is the master our desires drive us, and reason is simply the tool we use to fulfill those desires safely and cooperatively over the long term.
So morality is just practical.
Morality is the rational, negotiated system we create to ensure we can all pursue happiness in a crowded world without destroying each other in the process.
It's deeply practical, it's based on game theory and empathy. But what about the transcendent stuff, the things that make life worth living? If we're just meat computers driven by biological urges to survive, why does a piece of music make us cry? Why does a painting take our breath away? Carrier delves into what he calls the biology of beauty. He argues that our sense of awe and beauty is actually an evolutionary appraisal mechanism.
This is one of the most fascinating parts of his worldview. He cites research detailing how certain rules of beauty are literally hardwired into our neural pathways because they helped our hominid ancestors survive.
For example,
Symmetry. Across almost all cultures, we find highly symmetrical human faces beautiful. Why? Because in nature, physical asymmetry is often a biological sign of disease, genetic mutation, or severe malnutrition during development.
Oh, that makes total sense.
For our ancestors, finding symmetry sexually attractive was a massive survival advantage.
Yeah.
It meant you were picking a healthy mate.
He also talks about the peak shift effect.
Yes, I want to unpack the peak shift effect because this explains so much about art.
It comes from the ethologist Nico Tinbergen. He studied seagull chicks. When the chicks are hungry, they instinctively peck at a red spot on their mother's yellow beak, which tells her to regurgitate food.
Tinbergen found that if you show the chicks a fake wooden beak with one red spot, they peck at it. But if you show them a wooden stick with 3 giant red spots, the chicks go absolutely crazy. They peck at it frantically, ignoring the real mother.
Wow, just completely overstimulated.
Their brains are wired to look for the red spot, so a super exaggerated version of it overstimulates their neural reward system. That is the peak shift effect. Carrier argues that human art does exactly this. A caricature of a face or a highly stylized painting exaggerates the specific features our brains are wired to care about. It hits our neural tripwires harder than reality does.
So high art, literature, and soaring symphonies are essentially hijacking and playing with these ancient evolutionary tripwires. They educate us, they communicate complex emotional realities, and they massively enhance our appreciation of the physical world. But I have to ask the question that always comes up with scientific reductionism.
The fun part.
If I'm standing on a beach watching a breathtaking sunset, and I know that my feeling of awe is just an evolutionary trick to keep a hairless ape alive on a rock, doesn't knowing the science ruin the magic?
It's a common fear, the idea that science unweaves the rainbow. But Carrier, channeling thinkers like Richard Feynman, provides a brilliant counterargument. Knowing the incredibly complex, detailed physiological mechanism of how digestion works doesn't make a delicious meal taste any less amazing when you eat it.
That's a great point.
Knowing the exact neural pathways of a physical climax doesn't stop us from intensely enjoying it. In fact, Carrier argues that understanding the deep, staggering science of the universe, knowing that the iron in our blood and the calcium in our bones was forged in the nuclear fires of dying stars billions of years ago, actually deepens our awe. It provides a truer, infinitely more profound reverence for the reality of nature than any ancient myth ever could.
And that profound rational reverence extends to how we should govern ourselves in the real world. Carrier outlines a vision for what he calls natural politics. In a truly secular humanist society, public policy wouldn't be guided by ancient texts, clerical authority, or religious dogmas. It would be entirely guided by objective, peer-reviewed scientific research.
The goal of politics becomes remarkably clear and measurable, maximizing human happiness and liberty while actively minimizing suffering.
Right.
If we want to reduce crime in a city, we don't debate sin, demonic influence, or moral failing. We look at the hard sociological data on poverty, education inequality, lead in the water, and rehabilitation. We use the scientific method to test social policies, and we scale the ones that actually work in the real world, abandoning the ones that fail, regardless of ideology.
It's a vision of a society that is constantly self-correcting, constantly learning, using reason as its ultimate compass. Let's recap this incredible journey we've been on today.
It's been a long one.
We started by looking at how our very understanding of reality must be grounded in experiences we can actually test and predict, discarding untestable claims as meaningless. We saw how the scientific method, with its ruthless skepticism and demand for extraordinary evidence, systematically dismantles claims of historical miracles, like the rain miracle of Marcus Aurelius.
We then ventured out into the cosmos, seeing how the origin of the universe can be explained through space-time geometry, physical laws, and multiverse theories like black hole reproduction, entirely without the need for a divine, inefficient architect. We brought that physicalist lens back down to the human mind, understanding human consciousness and qualia as the breathtaking, complex products of biological machinery, not an immaterial soul.
We analyze religion sociologically as a mimetic virus, a historical phenomenon that provided the active chemical of community, but carries the highly dangerous, toxic side effects of dogma. And finally, we explored how abandoning the supernatural allows us to fully embrace secular humanism, finding deep meaning, negotiating natural morality, and experiencing profound beauty in the physical reality we actually inhabit.
The ultimate relevance of all this, why it matters to you listening right now, is empowerment. Understanding your own mind and your world through the lens of evidence isn't cold or robotic or depressing.
Not at all.
It deeply empowers you to seek genuine practical solutions to your real-world problems. It frees you from the guilt, fear, and manipulation of dogmas, allowing you to build a meaningful, ethical life based on truth.
Which brings us to a final, provocative thought I want to leave you with. Let's look to the future. Imagine humanity actually achieves Carrier's ultimate vision of natural politics. Imagine a scientifically managed, spacefaring, post-scarcity society, a world where disease is cured by genetic engineering, hunger is eliminated, and physical suffering is practically a thing of the past through technology and rational governance.
It sounds like the ultimate utopia. It is the goal of humanism.
But think about the biology we just spent the last hour discussing. Our entire psychology, our sense of beauty, our capacity for moral outrage, our deep empathy, our drive to overcome struggle, all of it evolved strictly to help us survive in a brutal, dangerous, unpredictable world.
So the deeply unsettling question becomes, what happens to the human psyche when there is absolutely nothing left to survive against?
Exactly. If our internal biological architecture is built entirely for overcoming adversity, what happens to us in a perfect world? Will we lose our minds in the crushing boredom of utopia? Will we have to scientifically engineer entirely new ways to find meaning, or even artificially introduce struggle and danger back into our lives just to feel human? We started this deep dive looking for a clear, binary X-ray of reality. We wiped away the murky diagnostic waters of myth and magic, and we found a reality governed by physics, biology, and evolution. But as we look to the utopian future we are trying to build with those rational tools, it seems the deepest mysteries won't be found in the stars or in ancient texts. They will be found right back inside the incredibly complex, evolved physical machinery of our own minds. Something to chew on. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
Hey there, you arrived to the end of this episode. You can always check out my YouTube channel and also keep watching because there are 7 episodes. So you just if you enjoyed this one, hopefully you are going to enjoy the next one. I always like to remember that you can support my work by buying my books. Even though I still don't have a book about religion, which is the main topic of the podcast, I do have a book about artificial intelligence, and also I have a blog called Scientists Free From Religion on Medium, and there are several blog posts there, and you can enjoy it, you can read it, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, you can share it with your friends. So hopefully I can hear from you and hope you had an amazing time. So hope to see you in the next episode.